This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 9, Episode 10. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by KSG Armory Holsters. Today is Wednesday, September 27th, 2023, as of the recording of this particular episode. And today, well, I'm your host, Riley Bowman, and I am joined by co host and producer, Matthew Maruster.
What's up, dude?
Glad to be with you, man, and glad to do a
Yeah.
Justified Saves episode with you today.
Yeah, seems like forever since we did one of those.
Yeah, it's been, I don't know. I don't know exactly how long it's been. I actually was reviewing the last time we did a Justified Saves episode, which was season 9, episode 1. So 9 episodes ago. I didn't actually
Hmm.
look at the date on that one. And there's kind of an interesting, there's two stories that are, there's like an interesting correlation between that last Justified Saves episode and the one we're doing today. But I'll save that for later on in the show. Keep everybody anticipating what that, you know, would what that is. It'll be fun. I I was like reading this one story and I was like, this kind of sounds similar. And I always want to make sure. I didn't think it was exactly the same one, but sometimes there's those ones we come across, and maybe just because like a news outlet picks it up, a month or two down the road, and it's like, I'll go back and double check that we're not, talking about the same thing, or if we are, we're at least giving an update. And so, anyway, I looked back at the last one and found something kind of interesting. Today's
Cool.
episode sponsors are CCW Safe, ccwsafe.com, and also guardiannation.com, which is our membership program. Folks, you want to check that out and consider being a part of that. One of the big benefits is being able to attend things like our annual Guardian Conference for a substantial discount. And then we also have KSG Armory holsters, which you can find at ksgarmory.com. So we're going to talk about three sponsors here today. We'll mention each of those a little bit more specifically throughout the episode. We appreciate our sponsors and for your support of our sponsors to make it possible to do what we do here. So, without further ado, Matthew, let's get into our stories for today. This, of course, being Justified Saves, which, if you're not familiar, if you're relatively new to the podcast, and certainly I do hope, we always hope that the podcast is growing, and that would mean adding some new folks. So, if you're new here, Justified Saves episode, that's our word for DGUs or defensive gun uses, which is another term that some folks in the industry like to use to describe such things. We like to use the Justified Saves description because, number one, it means that the person is justified in using some kind of deadly force, quite often involving the use of a gun, although not all of our stories have involved gun use. So it's justified, meaning it's within the bounds of the law, that it's self-defense, right? And then also that it's a save, which means the idea here is similar to body armor. Like Safariland has been known for many years, a couple of decades now, that they count their number of saves, like lives saved, cops on duty, for instance, lives saved by the fact that they're wearing their body armor. And so I think of this the same way. You use justified deadly force, you save your life, perhaps the lives of your family or other people you care about, or sometimes complete strangers, although those stories are a bit more rare. And that's the idea. That's the concept. So today is a Justified Saves episode. It's one of our favorites. Been doing this a long time. Kind of a crowd favorite, I think, of the podcast. People seem to enjoy it. So our first story today. Title is Burglar Dared a Georgia Homeowner to Shoot Him During a Break-In, and He Granted His Wish in the Best Way Possible. Well, it's kind of like that saying, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. This is a story on a website I've never been on before, usasupreme.com. Well, I like the sound of that. USA Supreme. usasupreme.com. Matthew, why don't you give us a rundown on this story out of Columbus, Ohio? So probably
Oh,
not too far from, well, hold on. Georgia homeowner And then it says, oh, the suspect's from Ohio. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
He's from Ohio, and actually, he was wanted in a murder for a stabbing death of a 77-year-old woman out of Ohio, and now he ends up in Georgia. So there you go. There's a little bit of context that sets the stage. Matthew, give us the rest of it.
Yeah. So this guy, you've already teed up that he's not much upstanding dude. So this dude, just before 2 a.m. Thursday, the Fayette County 911 gets a call from a resident in North Fayette County about a possible intruder in his house. Um, so they receive also a notification from the company. This homeowner has an alarm system, so they're also the alarm system's also calling the police. So it's kind of a secondary call. So they have two calls now on this one incident of a guy breaking in. They say deputies start responding, and it turns out that they say the homeowner armed himself with a gun and confronted the intruder in the basement. And the intruder was armed with a knife. Not sure how he got into the basement. Maybe it's slipped through a window, or it's one of those with a door that goes into into kind of a cellar or something like that. But anyways, this guy is armed with a knife in the basement. Homeowner confronts him in the basement, and the homeowner warns the intruder. He says, he said, if you can, if get out of the house, I'm armed with a firearm. I'm going to shoot you. And then it says there he took a stand. The homeowner takes a stand and runs up to the second floor. Lee's guy in the basement goes up to the second floor, says, "Hey, get out of my house. I have a firearm." And the article says there he took a stand as a subject made his way up to the second floor. He made the comment something to the effect of, quote, "You're going to have to kill me." This is the intruder. When the resident fired a second shot, that was about the time the deputies got there. From what we can tell, he was coming down the stairway with the second shotgun wound to meet the deputies. At that point, they actually still struggled with him as they took him into custody. So this guy had been shot at least 2 times, still fighting with the police. They take him into custody. And I like this, just because it shows that the guy did what he could. He gave the guy commands like, "Hey, I don't want to shoot you," or, "Get on my home. I'm armed," but he didn't just blast him right away. Now, certainly he had the right to do that. But perhaps, based on distance and how he positioned himself in the house, he didn't have to shoot him right away. He positioned himself, where the intruder would have to continue to come towards him and make it obvious that he was there to harm him. And by his own statements, he wasn't afraid of the guy shooting him. He knew that he had a firearm and he was there to harm the guy. So he gave him a little bit of, the homeowner gave himself a little bit of standoff time and ability to think and call the police and do all these things, instead of just rushing right up to him and having to make a split second decision. And it still ended up shooting the guy, but he didn't end up having to fight the guy or, potentially lose the gun in a fight or anything like that, get harmed, get slashed while he's shooting. So I like this because it actually had some detail about what the homeowner did during the shooting, other than, dude breaks in and homeowner shoots him. So a little bit of good detail there. But yeah, I thought that was a good addition to that story.
I agree, dude. I read that and I was kind of blown away because it's rare that we see detail to this level from such things, from these types of stories. I'm not sure where all that information came from, but bravo to the journalists that compiled it. I don't, the particular author of this article just identified it as Natalie Washington, and no idea who that is. But anyway, yeah, fantastic. I mean, this guy. I mean, it's very apparent we have an intruder. The guy's in the basement, like you said. I mean, he made his way somehow into the basement. Homeowner discovers him there. There's an initial exchange, like there's one shot fired in the basement. It says, and then the homeowner retreats to a different position of advantage. Almost always having the high ground is a position of advantage. And by this, I mean, the homeowner takes himself, like, he shoots the intruder and then withdraws It's like, dude, get out. I just shot you, man. And then he goes upstairs to the second level of the home and just basically chills there waiting, and continuing to, I'm sure, tell this guy to get the heck out of his house. I think this guy checked off a lot of boxes for like what to do's, good things to do, uh, best practices with respect to how you might conduct yourself, even though this is within your home, and even though that grants you a fair amount of leeway from a legal perspective as far as what you can and cannot do to defend yourself, your family, the other occupants of the home. Uh, but this guy, I mean, it's very apparent he did not wish to use deadly force. He made that very clear. That's a good thing. I mean, I wasn't worried at all reading this that there was any reason why he might see charges. But you want to conduct yourself in a way where it's very obvious, hopefully, to investigators that, like, no, I'm the good guy here. I'm the one that's in the right. I did absolutely nothing. I did my absolute best, to stay away from, um, crossing any sort of legal lines with
Mhm.
respect to use of deadly force. So, bravo to this guy, defending himself and his family as he felt he needed to, and only doing as much as he needed to and no more. So, pretty cool story. I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
An interesting thing about today's episode, by the way, is we have three stories about use of deadly force. So using a gun in defense of yourself against bears.
Yeah.
Now we see these kinds of stories pop up fairly frequently, but to see in just a couple of weeks here, three of them, basically back to back to back. I think let's see. I know at least. Let's see, that one's in Montana, and that one's in Montana, and that one's in Montana. Yeah, well, southwest and western Montana, which happens to be kind of where the border is with Idaho, which is not too far from where I grew up, which is not too far from Yellowstone National Park. So western and northwestern Montana or Wyoming, that whole region, that is like grizzly bear capital of the world. Certainly, there's places too in Alaska and Canada, but there's a lot of grizzlies in that region, and I think all three of these stories involve grizzly bears. No joke, take them seriously. I mean, same is true with even black bears. But if you're not familiar, grizzly bears are on a whole other level. They tend to be more territorial, more defensive, uh, and also they're a lot bigger and a lot meaner when they actually attack you. Bigger jaws, bigger teeth, bigger claws. Man, don't mess with these guys.
Yeah.
Uh, Having spent quite a bit of time in the Idaho backcountry, I used to always pack with me bear spray, but also I like to also have a firearm of some sort with me as well. I like having both options. I am familiar with instances of pepper spray not being effective enough, and certainly instances where people still died even though they had a firearm. So, anyway, um, this first incident happened near Freezeout Lake Wildlife Management Area near Fairfield, Montana. This is according to Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and it was reported on kbzk.com, Channel 7 News in Bozeman, Montana. Basically, what happened here is a hunter was walking along, hunting for upland birds. So he's bird hunting. So what's he packing here? He's packing a shotgun. What's most likely loaded in that shotgun? Bird shot, right? So he's got a shotgun loaded with bird shot, hunting birds. He's actually on private land, but he happens to come upon a bear, uh, and it charged him. Okay. And so it says here, and this is pretty remarkable, the hunter fired twice with his shotgun at less than 15 feet, hitting the bear at least once and causing it to run off. The hunter was not injured in the encounter. Dude, that is sketchy. I mean, number
Mhm.
one, less than 15 feet. And those bears can cover 15 feet like that. Not only that, they're probably, the better part of 15 feet tall, you know. So less than 15 feet with a shotgun, most certainly with bird shot. Two shots fired. Guess what? He's bird hunting. he's probably got 3 shells max in his gun, to be compliant with hunting regs. So I was like, dude, that's sketchy. But here's what's cool. You know what? Sometimes just the fear that is caused by the firing of a gun, sometimes maybe a little bit of pain. In this case, a bird shot striking the bear somewhere in his body, maybe his head, his face, who knows? It doesn't say where he shot him, but it was enough. It was enough to get this bear to break off its attack. Said that they tried to find the bear, they searched for it. Law enforcement and Fish and Wildlife, ranger folks. They even used a drone trying to locate the bear. Never did locate the bear. So whether it went off somewhere and expired, or if he is carrying his wounds, and just going about his merry whole way again, who knows? But a remarkable story there. That's the first one out of Montana.
Yeah, and dude, I like when these three, for if you're new, like I've said this before on the podcast, but I sort through like, dozens and dozens, maybe 30, 40 stories.
Yeah.
And when I was going through there and I found three of these, I had to go back and make sure, like, is this the same story?
Yeah.
Because, I didn't want to overlap it. And I'm like, nope, this is another one. Nope, this isn't. And there were three of them. And I don't know what it was, but like, I don't normally go on social media that much. But I was on there and I saw like two other videos that just popped up, and I don't know the time frame or the context, but like one of them was people, a video of people standing out, they're kind of like on kind of like a riverbank area, in a bear comes running at them, and one of the dudes, there's a bunch of people there, and he kind of like started screaming and got like waving his hands, and the bear kind of like diverted and ran off.
Hmm.
And it was a big bear. And then the other video was like this girl on a snowboard, and she was like fixing her bindings or something, stopped on the hill, and then she's videoing herself, and then you see her start, she starts going down the slope again, and in the background you see this grizzly bear just like running down the hill right behind her, and she didn't even know. And so is like,
Yep.
I don't know what was going on, like if those are recent or not, maybe they're not, but like a lot of bear stuff. And when I saw this, I'm like, man, this is like bears are like, like you said, we get some, every once in a while, every couple months there's a story about a bear or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe bears are just getting angrier and angrier. I don't know, man. But I'm not messing
Well,
with any bears. I'll tell you that much.
grizzlies are still a protected species by federal law, and that protection has afforded them the ability to, because at one time they were very much nearly extinct, and then protections were put in place, programs were put in place. Um, they established themselves pretty well in Yellowstone National Park, which is a national park, so even further protections offered there within a national park. And just over, I mean, I've seen a lot of this in my lifetime, so I've basically been around for 4 decades now. And I remember as a child, uh, yeah, you definitely were aware of bears and you knew they were out there, but not nearly as prevalent as what they are today. Like their population growth has grown
Mhm.
considerably in the last few decades. And again, I'm talking specific to the kind of that intermountain, Rocky Mountain region of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, where I have the most experience with this, and that they have, the grizzlies, especially in that area, have grown a lot. And so you see population growth and also population growth of humans, and that naturally means a little bit more encroachment on land space, land space. And so now you're seeing more and more interactions between these bears and people. So that is a very real thing, especially out there in the West.
Mhm.
So yeah. Hey, this reminds me real quick, and we got a couple more stories that are again about bears, and but I did want to point people to, we've talked about it before on the podcast, but Dean Weingarten from who writes primarily for ammoland.com. Dean has done a great job over the years compiling reports and stories of pistol use, so defensive use of pistols against bears, uh, and it's the statistics are pretty remarkable. A lot of people would say, I don't want anything less than a rifle defending against a bear, which is I totally understand and respect that. Certainly, even against human adversaries, if I had the choice between rifle and pistol, I know which one I would pick. But then even then they're like, well, yeah, but nothing less than like a 44 Magnum or maybe a 10 millimeter would be acceptable. But Dean's collection of evidence is pretty telling that, in all honesty, almost I'm not- I don't want to get anybody in trouble. And certainly you have to make the decisions for yourself as far as what you think is adequate for your own personal defensive needs. But almost any firearm is gives you a good chance. If it's provided you know how to use that firearm and get hits on target, gives you a good chance of surviving a bear attack. Okay, because even in the case of 22 long rifles, chambered guns, there's a number of instances where that's successful. Uh, then that's and even one of those in Dean's database, of his data set, one of those was a 22 used against a polar bear. I think that one was actually one of the ones that wasn't successful, but it's still a remarkable data point. But in pretty much anything like the 9 millimeter, 357 Magnum category, I think there was one or two instances of 38 specials not being effective, but plenty of other instances where 38 specials were effective. Four instances of 40 cal, 45 ACP. Again, I mentioned 9 millimeter. All those tend to be overwhelmingly successful in defensive use against bears. And so I'm going to drop a link in today's show notes, which you'll be able to access when you look at this episode when it's published, uh, to his most recent update, which was published just 2 weeks ago, September 15th, 2023. It's titled Recorded Defensive Uses of Pistols Against Bears Has Grown Exponentially. He's added even more data to his recorded information here, including some more instances going back to the 1890s and early 1900s. And within this article, he has a link to his previous articles that that goes into greater detail in some of the specifics. But basically, what his total collection, which now is like well over 100 instances and probably even more, it's about 97% effective in that of recorded instances where we know the weapon that was used. In cases where a pistol was used, about 97% success rate
Mm.
of defense against bears. And this is all types of bears. There's uh, black bears, brown bears, grizzly bears, polar bears, all included in this data set. So that's pretty remarkable. Um, it's noteworthy at the very least. Again, I'm not saying like, hey, all you need is a 22, go hiking in the woods, like, you're good. Uh, but it does give you some additional food for thought, some things to consider when you're trying to make some of those choices. I think where I'm at, and also considering the fact that I'm almost always also carrying bear spray, Matthew, is that
Mhm.
I tend to not really change anything up. I just kind of carry the same gun that I normally carry for typical suburban type defensive use. That's just what I don't change anything up.
Yeah.
Other than I've been known to pack instead of like hollow points, maybe FMJs or something for like max penetration. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're out there, you don't have to worry so much for your backstop, right? As you would like in a
right,
Walmart
right.
aisle. So yeah, that
That
makes
that's
sense.
that's my logic there is that backstop at way less of an issue, and then
Mhm.
number two, like I want penetration because yes, these can be large, thick-skinned, thick, meaty buggers. As long as I can get good shot placement and it penetrates deeply, I have pretty good confidence in my ability to do what I need to do. So there you go. So
Yeah.
that link to his latest article talking about that topic will be in the show notes of today's episode. Matthew, why don't you? Oh, actually, hold on. Before we get to the other two stories, I do want to talk about our first episode sponsor, CCW Safe. CCWSafe.com is our website. They've been sponsors of the podcast for a long time now. I think actually our longest continuously sponsoring company out there. We've been working with them for some time. Before they even officially sponsored us, we were already fans of their product, and so that's what I choose for my personal legal and liability protection, if you will, in the event that I'm involved in some kind of use of deadly force incident. Uh, Got to draw my gun in defense, defend my home, defend my family, whatever it is. I know I've got CCW Safe backing me up, and I know that they will do so because they've proven it in other cases and in protecting their other members. And also, I know, I mean, we just had the Guardian Conference, Matthew. I mean, you probably talked to, some of their folks there. Uh, like Gary Eastridge, one of our longtime friends over there, and longtime supporter of everything we do here. He's probably the guy I talk to the most over there. He's not only a great guy and supports us and supports their members when he's one of their top incident response people, but he's hugely valuable in that arena as well because he's super experienced in dealing with those kinds of cases because he's been on all sides of that. He's investigated murders, but now he's on the other side of helping defend you along with the CCW Safe team and any attorneys that they hire on your behalf. So check it out today, ccwsafe.com, and hope that you'll consider joining their program. All right. Guardian Nation members, by the way, get a 20% discount off membership. So, and we'll talk about Guardian Nation membership here in just a minute. Matthew, why don't you tell us about these other two bear attacks? Since they're kind of similar in topic, why don't we cover those next two things back to back?
Yeah. So this next one happened with two whitefish men, one Whitefish, Montana.
Yep. Beautiful
Um,
community. Been there many times.
yeah. So these guys are out scouting for their hunting season. So they're out there looking to see where they're going to be hunting. It says it's near Smoky Range Trailhead off of Canyon Creek Road in the Flathead National Forest. This happened August 26th. They encounter a female grizzly bear with a cub. That's
Mm.
never a good thing. I'm not, I don't know a lot about bears, but I'm pretty sure that's a bad thing. It says they're walking through a thick section of forest when they surprise the bears inside of 15 feet. So there's that 15 feet that
Oof.
you mentioned in the other
Oof.
story.
That's scary.
Yeah. So these dudes surprise this mother bear and her cub, and the adult bear charges both of these men. It says both men shot and killed the bear. One of the men was shot in the back shoulder during the incident. So apparently some friendly fire, but was okay. The bear ends up dying. They killed the bear. It doesn't say in the story if they were, that they had rifles, shotguns, pistols. Riley and I were talking about it, and we kind of came to the conclusion they probably had handguns just because they were just scouting the area. It's
Yep.
possible they had something larger, but it makes sense that they probably had something like that.
Yeah, that was my thought. I mean, because having hunted, many times and done so in bear country, but yeah, you're not scouting. You're not out there scouting your hunting grounds with a rifle unless you're an idiot. Or I guess if you really want to prepare yourself, because
Right, right.
no, I don't know about you, but I don't really know many people that enjoy packing around 7, 8, 9 pounds, whatever your rifle and scope weighs, just because you can, uh, especially through the woods, So, like when you have no expectation of needing to use your hunting rifle, like you don't want to be packing that thing around needlessly. So I was like, these guys are just out scouting. They're almost
Yeah.
certainly just carrying some handguns on them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we don't know the caliber or anything like that. But that goes into, kind of
yeah,
your evidence from that study from Dean. But and then the other one is similar. This happens to be two dudes that are fishing, and they're walking through what it says dense vegetation. This is Wednesday, August 30th, so only a couple days later, and this is the Tom Minor Basin. Not sure where
I
that
actually don't
is.
know where that is. I recognize all the other places we've talked about today, but this was reported out of Bozeman, just like the first story was.
Hmm.
Um, so it might be kind of in that area, but
Yeah, so and this one says two anglers were walking through dense vegetation where they're charged by a grizzly bear. One of the anglers shot and killed the bear. No people were injured. That's really all we have on this one. Again, no identification of what type of firearm was used, the caliber, anything like that, how many shots were fired, anything like that. But another bear that was killed by gunfire. And yeah, so the third in that month out there, man. I if you
Yeah,
guys
dude.
live out there and you're out hunting and stuff, be
Most of the
prepared,
folks that live up
man.
in that region, they know the drill. It's the
Yeah,
visitors that you gotta watch out for.
that'd be me.
Um, just one other comment I was going to throw at you on that second story, the one where the two men both shot and the bear, and one of the men, like you mentioned, was shot. It appears by friendly fire. It's just a good reminder of, number one, our skills need to be sharp, right?
Mhm.
So we have the capability of actually hitting what we're aiming at, and number two, that our visual awareness and decision making are really, really on, that they're up to snuff, because this can be very quickly a dynamic event, that's meaning that it's just simply it's evolving quickly and changing quickly, and man, you got to know where your people are at. You got to know what's acceptable backstop wise, and you got to be able to identify your target and shoot and actually hit it, right?
Mm.
These two men were very, very fortunate. Number one, that they survived the bear attack. Number two, that they survived the secondary attack, which was one of them hitting the other person with their gunfire. So kind
Yeah.
of scary there. I'm glad in the end everybody is okay. Poor bear, but this is something that sometimes happens, and this is sometimes the result. So
Yeah. Yeah, just to be alert and have your wits about you. I mean, I don't know how people go out and, if people, you know, um, you said most people out there pay attention. They know this stuff. I know, like, if I'm taking my family out to, road trips and stuff, I'm probably not taking them off into these areas without prior knowledge. And maybe, if you travel or something like that and you like to go to national parks, like, scout ahead, see if you saw like three bear attacks in a month, maybe, like, that's something that you investigate. You kind of see what kind of stuff is going on in the area. Maybe be a little prepared. It's similar to, like, if you're going to another city, is it a crime? Is there a crime area? Is it, that type of thing. So maybe something similar to that.
yeah, absolutely. Intel is a good thing. I mean, it's actually honestly the
Absolutely.
first thing where it
Yep.
comes to making decisions and having good strategy and tactics. You need intel. So know where you're going, know what you're getting into. Speaking of intel, this next story is kind of interesting in that regard, I think. It's actually one that you wrote on our website, concealedcarry.com, Matthew, but I'm going to talk about it, at least take the lead on
Yeah.
it. So, man fires 13 rounds through door at men trying to break into his apartment. DGU video. That's the headline here on the article you published August 23rd, 2023, as I mentioned on concealedcarry.com. So if you want to go read it there, you can read it there. Of course, you can see all the links to all the stories that we're discussing today on the show notes for this particular episode. This happened near Dallas, Texas, in the Oak Cliff neighborhood, August 19th. It's daytime. You can see that very clearly from the video if you review that. And the video is also included in this article, so you can go see this whole video. The video, by the way, is taken from basically a doorbell camera, if you will. And so these two guys, the two suspects involved here, come to the door, knock on the door, or ring the doorbell. The doorbell camera is activated. One of the residents, sees this. Okay, pulls it up. sees what's going on, sees these two men there, can actually, number one, at first he's just suspicious. He's like, because they were saying they had some kind of story they made up. They're like, hey, we're here, we're with building maintenance. We're here to replace your air filter or something like that, or your furnace filter or whatever. And he's like, this doesn't add up. Number one, probably like these guys don't look right. Like one of them was wearing a mask, like an actual, not just like what you would wear for it looks like a ski mask kind of thing, uh they don't, they're not dressed like they're in any sort of official capacity, and plus, I imagine if this guy's lived there for any amount of time, like this is probably, he's like, what do you mean you're here to replace a furnace filter? Like, I don't know. Maybe that apartment complex does that kind of thing. I know a lot of folks might have to do that themselves. But anyway, so he's like, not adding up. He responds. He talks to them through the doorbell camera. He's like, hey, nobody's home. Get the heck out of here, kind of thing. And they start kicking the door, trying to kick it in. And at this point, I think is probably when he notices, as he looks at the camera, that you can actually see one of these guys armed with a gun, like actually has the gun in his hand, standing outside. There's the one guy, red shirt, kicking the door. Guy in a blue shirt is just standing there holding a gun at like a low ready. And so the resident, who's just he's just hanging out at home playing video games with a friend, um, he goes and grabs his gun, which he described as being far away. Lesson number one: it's good to have a gun either on your person or nearby, even at home. I just make it a habit to carry all the time. Uh, it's become my, and I know that not everybody wants to do that, and that's okay. But and I'll definitely say there's days, occasionally days where I'm like, today I'm just chilling. I'm just wearing, the sweats or the basketball shorts. I'm not doing anything today. I'm not going anywhere. Today's a day I'm not going to, walk around the house with my gun on my waist. But those days are kind of rare. And even then, I certainly have tools at my disposal. But anyway, first lesson, right? He has to go, quote unquote, far away within his apartment to get his gun. Comes back. He figures out, again, these guys are lying to him. They're kicking the door. He took up a position, it says, by his couch. Maybe not the best form of protection, of cover, if you will, but better than nothing. And he then, at some point, right, and again, he could see one of the men had a handgun, so he starts firing and fires 13 rounds through the door. I don't recall, Matthew, seeing whether we had any information of these perpetrators of this crime being struck by the gunfire,
Yeah.
but certainly they skedaddle, right? Like they
Mhm.
get the heck out of there. Um, 13 rounds to the door. All 13 rounds, from what we can see, impact the neighbor's wall across the hallway here from this man's apartment. He said, fortunately, his neighbors had just left a short time before, so they weren't in there. But we also don't know for sure just how far these rounds went. Like, how many other walls did these go through? And could that have penetrated into another unit somewhere else? But even if that, again, if there had been somebody in that other unit, man, that's super sketchy, right? So that's another big lesson here is like, I I don't try to be too harsh, on a guy here that clearly had at least justification in defending himself, in that this is very much a violent attempt to break into his apartment by armed men. Um, However, we do need to be judicious still in our use of force, in knowing what we can and cannot shoot, knowing what our backstop is, because I mean, if we have to deal with the threat, we want to deal with the threat, and we don't want to hurt anybody else in the process. And this is a situation that, frankly, this guy got lucky that nobody else got injured. Like,
Mhm.
that's all it is. He's lucky. And I don't want to count on luck if I'm in a similar situation, right? I want to do what I got to do, and I don't want to have to count on luck in any way. Like, I don't want to count on luck that that because, I'm just supposing here that I don't practice enough, so my skill's not what it should be, but I'll get lucky, and I don't want to count on luck that, well, I don't know about, any bullets that miss and stuff, but like I'll just hope and pray that I get lucky that those don't strike anybody else. Like that's a terrible plan. So, in the end, this worked out. This guy's not in trouble legally. He's not facing charges. He defended himself, but he got lucky. So there's some lessons I think we can take away from this one.
Yeah, dude, for sure. And I think whenever clearly the dude had legal justification to defend himself with deadly force, and nobody's questioning that. I think like when we say something like, "Hey, this guy got lucky," and you have to be judicious when you're shooting and taking these, your backdrop into consideration, people like start hearing something different, and they hear like, "Oh, well, are you saying that he shouldn't have shot, or he shouldn't have defended himself?" And we're not saying that. But you do have to you do have to take these things into consideration, and that's what we're trying to say. And so, him taking up a position by his couch, that was good. Could there been a better position maybe down the hall that still provides, you know, ability to have some standoff distance where, and I don't know this guy's apartment complex layout, all that stuff, but it's something to think about in your own, if you do live in an apartment, because backdrop is different in an apartment complex compared to a standard home. Or in a condominium or something like that. The backdrop is oftentimes there's some a door right across from your door. So consider, where can I position myself? And this goes into like all those principled podcasts where we talked about responding to home invasion and stuff. But like, do I have a position of advantage that I can kind of dictate what's going to happen, and I don't have to shoot through the door to stop somebody from coming in, where even if they breach that door, I still have standoff and cover where I can engage that person with gunfire more accurately because I see them. And, we're not saying that the dude didn't have legal justification, but, those things are it would have been horrible if he would have killed, three of the, you hear some, imagine this. This is what I imagined. You're you're in an apartment, you hear somebody kicking the door. You don't know if it's your door or not. You go to your door and you look through the peephole, and it happens to be your neighbor across the way. And then that dude just erupts with lets out a ton of, gunfire, and you're standing at your door and you get lit up because it's going right through one door into your, or you have your family there and they're all like, "Hey, what's going on?" And so it's just something to think about. I mean, the guy's grouping isn't too bad. It wasn't like he was
It's
like,
not.
yeah, it's not bad.
He kept his shots together pretty well.
Mhm. But what was interesting, like when you see the holes, and I was just, as you were talking, I was looking at the pictures in the article. If you guys go to the show notes and you go to the article, there's a picture of him, the dude who defended himself, inside the door, and you see like the shot group from inside. So like the shot group that he fired.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the article, if you scroll down, you see the shot holes across in the wall right next to the neighbor's door. And to me, I was looking at that and I'm like, you see how the shot group looked good, but the spread once it hit that wall is much bigger than what the shot group is. So it's very deceptive, because perhaps he was moving a little bit, or those rounds have a little deflection here or there or whatever. But the actual group of like where the rounds impacted the wall, much bigger than the actual shot group that you see on the door. So that was something that just I saw.
Some of that's just distance.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
further and further out, those bolts go, or but here's the fun thing about that you noticed is if you look at the group on his door, the image of those holes through his door, and then you look at the group of the holes in the wall, that it's the same group.
yeah.
You
It's
can
just
see, you go, that's that bullet, that's that
mm-hmm.
bullet, that's like
Yep.
you can see that so distinctly.
Yeah.
It's just bigger mostly because of the distance.
Hmm.
It's just I would guess that across that hallway from where he was shooting is maybe not quite double the distance, or maybe close to somewhere so the, for every time you double the distance, like, that group's just going to get double the size, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just basic geometry. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and another thing, just real quick, that I this dude gives a pretty in-depth interview, with a reporter, news reporter. I'm, I mean, he's still got holes in the door,
Hmm.
and this happened, like, this interview he's giving is very soon after this incident, and now I mean, it's a pretty cut and dry. The dude had legal justification to defend himself, but you might want to consider, either not giving an interview with,
Hmm.
the news, an hour after you get in a shooting, or the next day, or consider talking to having
Yeah.
representation there and having them talk, or something. Just something to think about. You never want to,
Yep.
you never know how it's going to be twisted or how it's going to come across for what you're going to say. So.
Well, I mean, there's the criminal law side of things that you want to be careful about, in case for
Mhm.
some reason an aggressive DA wants to come after you for something. But then there's also you want to forget, or you don't want to forget, that it's not just that criminal piece, but also the civil piece. Like, what if
Mhm.
this dude's neighbor decides at some point they want to sue him,
Mhm.
uh, for the bullets that went into their apartment? Uh, Even for something as basic as, like, their TV got hit, like,
Right,
I
right.
now chances are there's a pretty strong case to go after and sue him potentially in that regard anyway. But I'm just saying, like, you're spot on as far as suggesting caution in speaking publicly about something like this, especially so soon after. I mean, you want to consult with an attorney, and maybe at some point you come out and maybe tell your story, but it's not usually right after this sort of thing happens. You want to make sure
Mhm.
everything gets sorted out. So
Yep.
yeah, there's actually that same piece of advice is actually going to come up in our next story as well. But before we do that, I'm going to mention one of our sponsors today is Guardian Nation. GuardianNation.com is the website you can go to and learn more. Guys, whether it's the uh, virtual training that you can access our whole library of training videos within Guardian University, which is a fantastic resource. I mean, hundreds of hours of training content within Guardian University. Guardian Nation members get full, complete 100% access as part of membership. You get discounts off a number of products and things. Of course, you always get 10% off minimum of everything sold on concealedcarry.com. And also, you get access to things like the Guardian Conference for a substantially reduced rate. And even while you're at that conference, you get special uh, uh, deals, such as being able to attend our VIP dinner and things. And so there's lots of reasons to be a Guardian Nation member, including the quarterly box of gear we ship out to our members. So check it out, learn more today, guardiannation.com. And if interested, you can take advantage, I think it's still active, of a 14-day free trial by going to concealedcarry.com/14 day, 14DAY. Also, our other sponsor, I want to get at, just get to this, and then we'll cover our last couple stories here. KSG Armory, ksgarmory.com. Matthew, you carrying a KSG Armory holster?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you
Got
better.
the Okay.
And certainly I am as well. Sorry, you were saying something. You
No,
got the
I have one hooked up to an Enigma and one for my Glock 19. So yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, it's the way, man. Like, obviously bias, right? Because we make the
sure.
holsters. I have a very personal involvement in the production of those holsters and the design of those holsters. But we were fans of KSG even before we acquired KSG, because it was previously owned by a dear friend and also industry professional that did a great job of launching and creating and establishing that brand, known for building quality holsters designed for serious end users like you guys. If you're here listening to us or watching a podcast today, you're probably a serious end user, and you should use serious tested gear, such as holsters and mag pouches and other accessories from ksgarmory.com. You can also save 10% off by using the code CC Podcast to get that special listeners only or viewers only discount at ksgarmory.com. All right. Final three stories. Matthew, he was like a lion in a cage. Naked man shot dead inside restaurant. Happened in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah. So, okay. So, Memphis, Tennessee, this place, this location that it happens is called Mr. Potato Head. That's
Apparently
the
some kind
name
of
of the,
restaurant.
yeah, that's the
All I know is,
restaurant.
man, like I got to try this place next time I pass through Memphis.
Mr. Potato Head. All right. So, apparently, dude comes into this restaurant called Mr. Potato Head wearing only sneakers. He pushes his way inside and wants water. Um, he shuts the door behind him and does it with such force. It's kind of like these double doors. And from what the is described as, he like jams the doors because he pushes them and kind of like causes the lock to kind of seize up, and now the doors are kind of locked. And they can't open. They can't push them out. They can't, they can't pull them in. And so now they're these two ladies that are working in there tell this dude, hey, like beat it, like get out of here. And he doesn't, and he starts getting violent. And so he starts getting enraged. He tries to leave. He can't leave. So he starts damaging property in the store. One of the ladies comes up to this dude, tells him to get out. He punches her in the chest. She is holding a firearm and tells him, points a gun at him, stop, calm down, get out of the store. And he can't, like, even if he wanted to. He doesn't try to, but even if he wanted to, he couldn't. And so she's afraid that, this dude is closing the distance. He's coming towards her. So she fires at him and strikes him. He ends up dying from his gunshot wounds, and they call police. And a lot of this is recorded, the aftermath, not the initial like shooting in the fight, but the post shooting. It seems very recent after the shooting, because I mean the guy's still there, and I believe you can kind of hear him kind of moaning in the background. So I think this was like almost immediately after the shooting. One of the ladies starts recording, and you can hear the other woman on the phone, the shooter who shot this dude, on the phone with the police, kind of giving them a rundown of what's happening. So I know you wanted to talk about, a little bit about the phone call and maybe some of the tactics. So I'll hand it over to you, and you can kind of take this one, the new dude that gets shot.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing there, as I mentioned, is that last story, word of caution about being so quick to, whether it's post things on social media, talk to actual media, do interviews, that kind of thing. Really want to be careful with that, right? So this gal did a news interview as well, very soon after this happened, telling her story. And again, like, this seems like a very clear and cut, dry case of self-defense. There's no and nothing at all that seems to suggest that the prosecutor or police is trying to arrest or charge her. It does say that they detained her for a brief time after the initial incident. That some is a lot of times to be expected, and pretty standard procedure with such sorts, with such things. In fact, I would at least be prepared for that probability if you're ever involved in using, especially a gun in defense. At the very least, when police arrive and it's like, well, hey, you shot this dude here, and like you still have your gun on you, kind of thing. Like, even if you holstered it, chances are they're going to at least put you in cuffs while they, number one, do initial investigation, number two, remove a gun off of your person, because they don't know who you are. I've seen it go both ways too. There's a video I remember coming across years ago where guy shoots a dude. Actually, I don't even know if he ended up shooting him. I think he just held him at gunpoint, calls 911 as he's standing there with his gun on this guy. It's like in a parking lot, and police arrive and everything. He's still talking to dispatch, has his gun out, and all that. And they arrive and they're like, "Hey, put your gun away, holster up," kind of thing. And he does. He just follows their instructions, and so there's we've talked about this kind of thing, a number of times, and no need to like go down that rabbit hole. But point here that I was starting on was be careful talking to media. This lady said that she posted on Facebook to let loved ones know what was happening. I don't know what the level of detail was that she shared, but again, be really careful with that kind of stuff. Talk to an attorney, even when you know you're in the right and that you did nothing wrong. Talk to an attorney. Get an attorney. In this case, CCW Safe. It'd be
Yeah.
perfect thing to use. Okay, call CCW Safe. Get them on the phone. Uh, listen to their advice. They're going to get in touch with an attorney that's local that can work with you. They also have attorneys on their staff. So talk to them, get that incident team at CCW Safe spun up. Um, do what you're told. One of those is probably going to be, don't talk to police until your attorney advises you, gets there, or something, uh, or they'll tell you what to say to the police and or investigators. Okay, because like there's probably some things that are good to mention and point out or to actually explain, right? So listen to their advice or to the advice of an attorney. And also one of those things is probably going to be, hey, don't talk to the news, don't go on social media, all that kind of stuff. So I think the
Mhm.
tactics here, I mean, this dude was grabbing chairs and trying to, hit people with them, and was approaching this lady and wasn't responding to commands to stop or to back up or to get out. And when he also became violent towards specific individuals, she shot him. And so kudos to her. She did what she had to do. She said in her interview that she didn't mean to or want to harm or kill anybody, and she was, I think, even a bit surprised, or perhaps saddened when she learned that he passed away later at the hospital. And she said in her interview, she's like, I mean, everything was below the waist, where she shot him. uh, so guess what? There's things below the waist, like femoral arteries and things that you get shot in and you can die. So not all people understand that, and I think unfortunately for her, she learned that this particular day.
Yeah. Yeah. And she also says like the dude was physically like overpowering. She was afraid that she knew she couldn't stop this dude, and she was afraid even with the firearm that he was going to come and just take it away from her and then use
Yeah,
it against her. So I mean, this is one of those times where she's, you know, certainly feared, had a reasonable fear. This dude is, in one of the videos you hear like one of the ladies say, "Oh, this guy used to be one of our, regular customers until, dope like messed him up or something." Like,
yeah,
so they might have known this guy from before, known him as like, in the area. Certainly if he's coming in wearing only sneakers, he's probably not in his right mind. So it's one of those things, man. You don't know. You're just chilling out at Mr. Potato Head, and all of a sudden you got to shoot somebody. So
yeah.
you never know. You never know.
Yep. I'm gonna let you take the lead on the next one too, Matthew. Armed taxi driver turns the tables on attempted robber accused of targeting cabbies. The one thing we do know as we read this story is that two other cab drivers from the same company were robbed like the week prior. So
Hmm.
this was a thing. But fortunately, in this instance, this guy was able to put it to rest. This, according to Fox10Phoenix.com, although it's a story involving, comes out of Metairie, Louisiana.
Yeah, so not a ton of info on the actual shooting. Just that it happened before 1 a.m. on a Monday. Suspects armed with a handgun demands money from the cab driver. Cab driver is armed. He shoots the suspect multiple times, and the suspect dies. He's a 23-year-old kid who. They said they suspect him in these other armed robberies that were robbing cab drivers leading up to this one. He matched the description and everything like that. In fact, it says he matched the description of a man who robbed a cab driver the day before the shooting around 3 p.m. and another cabbie the week prior. Um, like you said, they all work for the same company. One of the statistics in this article that's linked in the show notes says that neighboring New Orleans suffered a staggering increase in crimes last year, including a rate of 70 homicides per 100,000 residents, a 20% increase in armed robberies compared to 2019's pre-pandemic data, and 156% increase in carjackings compared to 2019. Those two things we have been reporting on, that carjackings are like up all over the place.
Mhm.
um Violent crime, maybe not, different types of violent crimes, including like multiple people attacking shop owners, and going in and stealing things, and just having like a bunch of people attack somebody. Those things are up. And the age of these people, this suspect happens to be, I think, I said 23 years old, but I mean, quite often we're seeing carjackers, the suspects are in their teens. We've even had kids that were like, I think it was like 12 years old or 13 years old doing armed robberies, and we
Mhm.
reported on that. So you just, not trying to scare anybody or anything, but especially if you deliver food, you work for Uber, you deliver, you're a pizza driver driving at night, or you drive cabs or something like that. Even though you're not using cash, these people don't care. I mean, they want a cell phone, they want, maybe your car or whatever you have on you. So you gotta be careful.
Yeah. Yep. Well covered. Final story. We got to wrap this up. Phoenix home intruder shot by teenage boy. This is, well, as it stated, out of Phoenix. This is also reported on fox10phoenix.com, same source as that last story. Um, this happened about 10 p.m. on September 8th. So it's, it's after dark, right? Basically, police arrived, or were called to a home. They arrived about 10:13 p.m. They contacted a man out in front of the home who was suffering from gunshot wounds to his abdomen and right arm. Turns out he was the suspect involved in an attempted break-in of this home. And this actually started with a motion notification on a security system. So a woman noticed this, discovered this man walking around the front of her home. Curious thing, she actually says that she exited her residence and gave the defendant, the suspect, several commands to leave the area or he was at risk of being shot. She did this in an attempt to scare him away from the residence's front yard area, it says, according to court documents. It says the victim stated she then ran back inside of her residence and instructed one of her children to close and lock the door behind her. The victim stated as she entered her residence, she began calling police and went to retrieve a firearm in order to protect herself, her husband, and 5 children located inside. So again, about 10 p.m., the woman, this mother and wife, is she goes out of her home, issues this command of get out of here, or you might get shot, right? Goes back inside the house, has a child lock the door behind her. She gets her gun and calls police, right? There's a lot going on there, and I don't know what role, if any, the husband or father of this family played in this. There's no mention of him other than she was doing all this to protect her husband and her 5 children. So I don't know if this dude's just like passed out or what, because like I think I'm not saying like should have been his role to grab the gun per se. I mean, I think men or women both equally can be responsible in that regard. But I do think this guy could have done something. Like maybe she could have had her husband call 911, which would have freed her up to, worry about other things. So I just thought that was interesting, Matthew. Like normally,
Mm.
my wife and I have had a couple of things over the years, um, where calls have been placed late at night to to emergency services. And, I think we have a pretty good teamwork approach to that. It's like, oh, hey, did you hear that? Hey, you call 911. And we basically have that assignment. Like, if I'm home, um, I'm grabbing a gun, flashlight, whatever defensive tools I feel like I need. She's getting on the phone. So, division of labor here. It's kind of a thing, and it's really beneficial when we have more hands involved, and uh, allow us to focus on the whatever important things lie before us. She then goes back. She's somewhere inside the home. She hears a glass window get broken by this man. Okay, and can see his hand reaching inside. He's reaching for the door handle. So he breaks a window, whether it's on the door or in a window next to the door, but he breaks a window and is now trying to reach in to unlock and open the door. Scary stuff here, right? It's time to act. And she seems like she's prepared to do that. 911's been called. She's retrieved a firearm, but this guy starts actually working his way into the home. And at some point, a 13-year-old son of hers is like, "Mom, yo, dude's coming in." And you're standing there with a gun. Her 13-year-old son grabs the gun out of her hand and then shoots the suspect a couple of times. Bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo, 13-year-old boy. Again, I don't know where dad is, but but I mean, like, that was remarkable to me, Matthew. I read that. I was like, whoa. From the initial headline, you're like, teenage boy shoots intruder. You're like, well, we've covered stories like that. This one's interesting in that mom already has gun. Mom's right there, sees dude trying to break in. Mom doesn't use gun. So her son has to intervene, and basically he's like, fine, I'll do it. I'll take one for the team. Like, good on that boy. Although as a parent, I got to be like, yo, I don't, if it comes to this, I don't want my child to have to bear the burden of shooting and potentially killing somebody, right? Like, I should be bearing that burden for my child. I don't want them to bear that. But she couldn't do it for some reason. So
Yeah.
don't know what everything that was going on there, but good on this boy for having the sense about him to go ahead and do what he felt he needed to do to defend his mom and his dad and his other siblings. Pretty remarkable stuff there. Now, the suspect here was just wounded. Appears like that he is making recovery. Has been charged with numerous charges. All that is fine and well. So, yeah, pretty crazy thing here. It does say in other data points in the news article here, this guy had, he's on methamphetamine, and so there's reasons that he was doing what he was doing, I suppose, but uh, as to why he had selected this family, this household, I don't think that we really know the reason for that. Appears to be completely random in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I was with you about, the boy taking the firearm. It's I think it just for me it underscored like we need to have not just like the technical ability to squeeze, to press a trigger and hit a target. We need to have like a mindset that says like I can do this under stress and potentially take somebody's life. And I don't know if she froze up and he was just like, you know, if she doesn't do it, I'm stepping in, or he perceived a threat, in a way that she didn't, or whatever. But clearly there was a different mindset of like, we need to act now and you're not. And whatever that was. And yeah, good on him. And good. This is one of those things where like people, demonize parents teaching their children how to be safe with firearms or how to shoot firearms. You hear all the time like, oh, well, a kid posts to his Instagram or Facebook, some 16-year-old kid or something posts his parents taking him to a gun range, and then the school administration freaks out. It's like, oh, you're going to be a school shooter and all this. But like but kids need to be able to do this. And it's not just a hypothetical thing. We see this often where teens and children take firearms and save the family from
Yeah.
some lunatic. So,
Yeah.
yeah, good on that kid, man.
So one of the reasons why I am not a fan of legislation, where we basically say, we're going to legislate households into or mandate them into, well, firearms must be stored securely. Like, I think it should be left up to every family how, what their approach there is with respect to how firearms are stored, how they're secured, who has access to them. Um, for sure, there are problems in that regard that people don't store things correctly, properly, safely, or allow people that shouldn't have access to have access. But
Hmm.
I think it should be left up to, you know, like in a free society, like there's assumed risks that have to also exist if we're going to be truly free. And I think people should be free to make those decisions because there's for sure families and kids that would be dead today if some underage, meaning under age of 18, kid didn't for some reason have access to a defensive tool, like including a firearm to actually defend themselves, their siblings, their families, their households. So a controversial thing for sure. I know. I mean, it shouldn't be in my opinion, but like I understand why it is, and certainly I take secure storage seriously in my household. I still got little kids in my family, but I also have a 17-year-old son that I would absolutely trust, and he's been pretty well trained, honestly, to grab a gun and defend the household if he had to.
Yeah.
So, and frankly, he's probably the one more likely to do so than my own wife, who she's not a particular, gun person per se, like she knows how to shoot, but she's not her thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. That brings us to a wrap of our stories today. We're a bit over time. I hope you've enjoyed this. I was saving one thing here for the end though, Matthew. This was our last story, and this is where there's a correlation to the last time we had a Justified Saves episode. In the last episode 9 or season 9, episode 1, we shared a story of a teenage boy. I think he was 13 or 14 years old that grabbed his mother's gun and defended her against a violent attack in a Chicago like hot dog shop or something.
Hmm.
Remember
Hmm.
that now?
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
so I was like, holy cow, 2 Justified
Hmm.
Saves episodes in a row where there is a teenage son of a person, and I guess in both these cases, mothers, that grabbed their mother's guns and defended themselves with it. I thought that was
Yep.
pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So there you
Yeah.
go. That's what I
Got a good
saved for the
memory.
whole episode.
You got a good memory, man.
Well, it's just something, rang there. It's like, this is a familiar, storyline here. Anyway, hey, today's episode sponsored by CCW Safe, which you can find at ccwsafe.com, Guardian Nation, which you can find at guardiannation.com, and KSG Armory holsters, which you can find at ksgarmory.com. Thanks to our sponsors. Thank you for supporting us and our sponsors. And thank you for sharing, liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bells, all that stuff with respect to the podcast. Do hope that you enjoy this content and that you will help us like and share it. Thank you so much for this episode today, folks. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
And so we'll let you go. Until next time, a reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.